Hello and welcome to Crafting a Revolution, the podcast. My name is Katie Freeman and I'm one of your hosts. Every week we bring you interviews with makers and artists of all kinds from all over the world who identify as female, non-binary, or transgender. Today's episode is something a little bit different. It is a conversation between myself and my co-host, Katie Thomspon of Women of Woodworking and Pen and Chisel, the online journal. It's been a while. It's been a minute since Katie and I had a chit chat. And so it was great to just catch up on things. And we spend quite a bit of time talking about growing equity and inclusion in the community of craft, what resources are out there right now, how we're both getting involved, and a little bit about, how others can get involved as well. So great conversation, great topics to be covering. Before getting into that conversation with Katie, I want to give a big shout out and thanks to the patrons over on Patreon. So thank you so much, Matthew from Artigiano Serio, for being our main podcast sponsor this month. And thank you in addition to Candace, CJ Woodgrain, Lee Runyon, Annette 513 Woodworks, Katie, Women of Woodworking, Kevin, Lefty's Woodshop, Christy, Twisted Twine, Jeremy Speece, Sammy, Go Sammy Lee, Rachel, Moody Makes, Laura, Oakley Soap Company, Brandy, Studio Obey, Ellen, Little Bear Furniture, Ethan Carter Designs. Thank you all so very much for your continued ongoing support, helping to produce the podcast every week. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please stick around to the very end so you can find out ways for you to support as well. All right, let's head on into the conversation with the Katies. So, hi, Katie. How are you doing?
Hi, Katie. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm down to counting the days down till my last day of work and when I officially start as a graduate student. So
that's right. That's so exciting.
I know.
When do you start? Excited. September?
I have my graduate student orientation on August 17th and school starts on the 22nd. So I'm really looking forward to that. Family's taking a big vacation to kind of your neck of the woods. I mean, not right next door, but Smoky Mountains area is where we're taking a vacation to.
Oh, fun. Yeah, that's close enough.
Yeah. Close enough. I'm thinking, I don't know if I planned that well in August. It's probably going to be very hot.
Yeah. Even in the mountains.
Yes.
It's pretty hot that time of
year. Yeah. But looking forward to doing some of that and then getting into, I was finding myself, I'm looking for some on-campus work, to do just because I'm lucky enough the program's fully paid for. I won't have to take loans or anything like that, but I still won't be making an income to bring home. So I was like, okay, let's look at some on-campus jobs. And I found myself at first, looking at stuff that I've always done, for the last, almost 20 years. And I'm like, oh, wait a second, I could do something completely different. Because even on-campus work is an opportunity to learn something completely new. So every aspect, it's I get to spend 2 years doing art. I'm super excited.
I'm so excited for you. That's a dream come true. And congratulations on, the program, but you're absolutely right. And this is one thing that I dealt with, going into arts management and also trying to develop my own artistic voice was time. School, yes, it's paid for, but there's so much cost in the time that you're going to spend, outside of just being in class and getting there and stuff. So I'm thrilled for you, and I'm so excited to see. I can already tell that you have a new perspective on things, and
yes,
such an exciting time.
I am I think I'm just equally as excited to take what I learned, kind of let it simmer up there and then share it as much as possible. Because that definitely is one of the reasons is I want to help break down that barrier for people who don't get to the opportunity to go to school and learn the things that I'm going to be learning, because I can tell you, running a business for almost 6 years, it's like, this isn't all easy information to find, of just like navigating the industry. Like, art is an industry, and I don't, like, nobody tells you that like in art school, I don't think. So, which they really should, because I feel like that's like a key proponent of like how somebody can go to art school and like actually make a livable wage for themselves after the fact.
And absolutely. And like, this is something that we've run into as like furniture makers and, people, artists making commissions and working kind of that way. It's like, we had to kind of sit down and say, okay, are we artists or are we a business? Because, you have to approach things two different ways, but no matter what, like, you have to realize that when you become a self-proprietor, like, you are your business. And there are so many things that they don't teach you. And that's why I feel like we're lucky to live in like the virtual age, and like also where there's a lot of maker spaces and like community-based organizations and places like a workshop of our own, furniture society, that are doing a lot of like virtual courses as well. Like, I know I took an accounting course, maybe it was a taxes course. Well, that shows you how much I paid attention to it. Virtually about a year ago, but it was like something that like I've been wanting to do and like needed to do, and I just like finally like sat down and did it, and was like, okay, there's so much. And like, that's I if I could be a lifelong student, I would. I can't afford to do that, so I just like research on my own free time, and stay up to the wee hours of the night searching the Library of Congress or whatever. But that's the exciting thing about school. And like, also, I know for me, I wish when I was younger I would have and this is just how you are at 19, 20, the value of time, and that some things take time. At that, I remember being very impatient and like wanting to get this perception down. I wanted to be able to draw really well. I wanted to be able to do this. And like, now that I'm older, it's like, now I really see the value of like the instruction and the guidance, and instead of just like trying to rush to be something, just letting it be itself. So
I think that's definitely something that comes with age. And I think maybe this is why they don't. I think if you get like a bachelor's degree in some kind of art or design program, and they don't have that business stuff, I almost do wonder, at 19, 20, 21, 22, is it going to really like connect and sink in the idea? I mean, granted, the 20-year-olds now have grown up with social media and probably really understand that much better than you or I understood that at that age. But still, like, I don't know. Like, I feel like some of the things, I just feel like so many things that I've learned in life had to be learned the hard way. Like, I don't know if like it had been given to me of like, here's, steps 1 through 10, and then you'll be successful or whatever at that age. Like, I don't know if I would have fully grasped it.
Yeah. And I remember like hearing this statement a few weeks ago at an event I was attending, but like, there is no magic formula, otherwise we would all already know it and be doing it, and that's another thing that's just like hard to also like come to terms with. I know at that young age, it's like, okay, there isn't going to be a magic formula. You have to keep working no matter what. Like, you have to keep trying things and trying different things if things don't work out. Learning that the hard way. There are some things, that reminds me, like, when I was first learning woodworking, how wood moves, and, you just can't do certain things with it and it will snap. And I've tried, now that I'm a little bit older, to, like, watch and
yes.
Not get all up in it, but
right.
I think so, I hated being told that when I was younger, but
Yep.
there are just some things, and it's just the way it is. So
I think, I mean, some of it probably comes from, I think we still do put a lot of pressure on our young people to make them think that at the age of 18, they have to know what they want to do with the rest of their life, as well as like they have to become successful like by some deadline. It's like time, like this idea that you expire at some point in time, when I'm like, no, like, you know, my sisters give me a hard time. Last year I turned 40, so they've always called me old, but they're young. So, but they give me a hard time, and I'm like, no, you like don't understand. Like, at least personally, I wasn't upset about hitting 40, because I was like, especially my late 30s were actually really awesome. Like, I felt like I learned a lot about myself and learned a lot about like just my role in community and society and parenting and all of those things. Like, so it can only get better. Like, that's why I am completely serious. I mean, you could not pay me to relive my 20s. Like, there is no way I would ever do that. But I did what 20-year-olds do, right? You make a lot of stupid decisions in your 20s because you're learning how to live life on your own as an adult, not with parents telling you how to do things. So yeah.
yeah, it's wild how we like thrust 18-year-olds out into the world and like, all right, you're an adult now, but then we still in a lot of ways have not prepared them to be adults. I'm with you. Like, people are like, high school, you know, college were the best years of my life. I'm like, you know, like, I'm good.
I'm good. I did appreciate college only because I felt like I finally found a community who was like, I mean, of course, there were people there who were like just there because their parents told them to be there. But I felt like I did find a community who was like interested in learning. Like, that felt really good to me. Like, I was the nerd in high school, and I never found that like group of people who really geeked out about just learning in general. But still, yeah, I would not go back. And I think that's changed my perspective with like my own kids. Like, I don't preach college, I preach curiosity and interest. And it's like, no, let's just find things you're interested in and then learn the heck out of it. Like, let's just figure it all out. Because I think that's a skill that will transfer to whatever you end up doing. And let's be real, our kids, your and my kids, are probably going to have like 50 different careers in their adult lifetime.
We've already had 20, so
yeah.
Not looking good.
No, I know. I know. Okay, so I don't know how, I hope the podcasters, like the Pod Squad, knows this by now, but you're like, you have fingers in all these different places and know all these different resources and things going on kind of in the world of craft. And so I do like want to just spend time catching up with you about like what's going on out there. Where should people be like checking out that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I'd love it. You're right. I do have my hands in a lot of things. But at the same time, like, it's really exciting. You know, we talk about being young again, you know, to think of where I was. I remember being in this house just like sobbing one day because I was like, I'm never gonna be there. I'm never gonna find my way, you know, like, and now I can sit here and be like, girl, calm down.
Yeah.
You know, it takes time.
Today's episode is sponsored by Athena Outfitters. Athena Outfitters is a quality workwear brand for hardworking women that sells everything badass beauties need to get the job done, from work boots to basics. They curate the toughest essentials made to help you perform. Every piece is handpicked to seamlessly slide right into your daily lifestyle, from rugged and roguish weekday wear to effortless weekend flair. You can fill your closet with gear that can do it all. So for Christmas, I ordered my wife like a very nice pair of slippers from Athena Outfitters, and she loves them. loves them so much that she has accidentally gone to the gym and the grocery store in them because they seem to never leave her feet. So definitely a place to go check out, go get the goods that help you not only out in the shop, but just in your daily work around the house and outdoors. As a listener of the podcast, you can go to Athena Outfitters website and use coupon code M as in M&Ms 15 for 15% off any purchase. So again, you go to athenaoutfitters.com and use the code MM15 and get 15% off of your purchase at checkout.
Mm-hmm. But that's the thing again that I feel like I can offer to the community. I wish that I could be this like fantastic artist and have these great techniques and be able to teach everyone. And like I have so much respect for the people in our community that do that, because that is hard work. It's hard physical work, it's hard mental work, emotional work. It's beautiful. And then to be able to create your own work on top of teaching or sharing or whatever it is you do. It's just really wonderful. At the same time, I'm really grateful that the community has also seen my strengths in writing, talking to folks, interviewing, gathering stories, sharing them, amplifying. I love finding opportunities and connecting people and seeing what can grow from that. I just genuinely really love being of service. So at the same time, it's hard, especially like having, physical limitations and disabilities that keep me from creating all the things I want to create. At the same time, the world has seen, what my strengths are, and it's been beautiful, the support that I've received and everything I've been able to do. So I love my job. I just literally, I get to talk about woodworking all day and craft and do research and history and, just talk about things that I'm interested in. And I think it really matters, when you do take the time to find your voice. And this is something that, I obviously struggled with early on, and maybe now that's why it's resonating is, I know who I am. I know what I'm interested in. I know the stories that are important to me that I feel like, are important to be shared. And there's just a confidence that you get over time. And it's a kind of a contentment almost, it's just like, I'm in the right spot, maybe not in my greater life, I might be living in a burning building, but this sweet spot is here. And I think that's something a lot of creative people and artists can connect with. And that's why we create is seeking that like presence of moment and like, so I get to talk about that all day and, work with organizations that are so passionate about improving education and access, and have really listened to me as a woman, as a person with a disability in this community, and not just say, oh, that would be too hard. Like, that I have created my own spot at the table. And of course, I'm bringing everybody with me. So, there's so many things, I know it's hard. Before we started recording, we're talking about, kind of the state of things. Really easy to get down and hard on the state of the world and the state of society, and where does that place us as people? How does that affect us as makers in our craft, as business owners, as parents, partners, all the many things we have. But this is where the hope and the joy lies, and this is where the opportunity to really rebuild lies. And there are a lot of opportunities, and a lot of small changes. They seem like small changes, but they're all part of this bigger wave that I can see from my perspective. That at least within the making, the craft, and especially the woodworking world, organizations are listening. People are listening. The people with power, with the audiences, are being called out pretty systematically. And however you feel about that, the conversation has to be had, and that is alone, something that it has to happen. It is tremendous progress from us burying our head in the sand and pretending like it doesn't exist, because there are still plenty of people out there that are trying to do that. Don't get me wrong. But seeing, the initiatives, the scholarships, the grants, the investment of organizations and also other foundations that might not necessarily do the work, but want to give the money, have a specialized interest in advancing the work and voices of, BIPOC, women, LGBTQ plus artists, makers, a lot of underrepresented, historically underrepresented voices, for whatever reason, haven't had access. So removing those barriers. And then also once they're making their work, giving them the opportunities that they need to thrive and survive as artists. So I'm so grateful to be on the board of the Furniture Society. That has just been, I've only been there, on the board like 6 months, but having worked with them for the last year and a half, it's really been transformative for me as an artist. And it's also been transformative for my project, specifically the Women of Woodworking project. The time and energy that they have taken to sit and listen and, strategically plan programming, find makers that we haven't worked with before that might have a unique perspective, or aren't typically seen, in the pages of our most popular, woodworking magazines. They're really making the effort. So when they asked me to join the board after having, done the Women of Woodworking Affinity group with them for a year, I was just super honored, because to me, it was just validation and confirmation of like, you're doing good work. Here's a boost. And like, to have them as a partner in just me personally, and then to be a part of that organization as a whole, it's just really, I'm in awe, having known the history of the organization and the people that have worked to keep it going. And then also transforming its own identity. I think for a long time, people looked at studio furniture, woodworking, and still do, as, traditionally white male dominated. And that was, or even, getting into like elitists, if you want to get into classism, DIY versus fine furniture conversations. The thing that I really love about what Monica and Pam and the entire board are doing are trying to be as inclusive as possible and really trying to turn that on its head. And I'm really excited to see where we'll be at 3 to 5 years from now, because how much we have been able to change, even how I view the organization in the past year and a half. And now knowing, like, seeing what's happening on the inside, it's really exciting. And then also making it a priority to invest in things like education. There are a lot of resources for woodworking education out there. There's a lot of really talented, knowledgeable folks, schools, institutions, but there's a lot of gaps that still need to be filled. Topics like, accounting and bookkeeping, marketing, websites, photo editing, little things like that every artist and maker is gonna have to, at some point in your career, you're gonna have to solve a problem with some of these skills that you may have never even talked about, in art school or your education before. So really excited about the professional development track we had at our virtual conference in June this past month. And I was a presenter, but then I attended like the entire rest of the week. I'm going to watch the recordings as an attendee, because I learned so much. Like, there is still so much, that I was able to get from it. And there was really something for everyone, and a great variety of topics, a lot of experts. But the other thing is to, we're bringing these experts to the table, giving them the opportunity to present. How do we make sure the people that need access to these resources get to that, And that's where the Schooner Foundation particularly came in and sponsored 20 scholarships for women and BIPOC makers to be able to attend the full conference, and also get a free, year-long membership to the Furniture Society, so they can keep fostering this foundation that they're going to build there. And that was just huge. And seeing the applicants, and I was able to serve as like a mentor. We did mentor sessions and portfolio review sessions, and being able to talk to some of the recipients and see some of their work. It's just like, this is it, and also bringing in people to serve on scholarship committees and things like that that have a vested interest in, equity and accessibility, have, a unique perspective within the woodworking and furniture making community. I'm just really proud. The work is being done. It takes time, but I can promise you the work is being done, and there are enough people that are kind of checking each other to make sure that the work gets done too. I love that about that organization is it's just so incredibly supportive. But
I mean, I've said it on here. So very recently I joined as a member of the Furniture Society, and I mean, I'm going to be open and honest. Like, I knew this work was going on. Some of this work was going on, but I kept watching like my newsletters, and until I saw like the speakers released for the conference, which I didn't get to attend, but I at least saw like who was going to be speaking. That's when I was like, okay, now I see it reflected, and now I'm willing to give my money. And that's not to say I was necessarily like, I guess I was a little bit withholding. And that's because it's like, I think there's like a lot of really great people involved in this. I'm still just not seeing like it come to fruition. And I will say I agree that I think it's definitely like now kind of it's being seen, the work that's been going on in the background, and lifting up other voices. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to put that out there because I know that there's a previous episode where I was like, I still think they need to do a little work. I think they need to do a little work.
Well, no, and it's like you talked about, and like, first of all, like, it's never my intention to pressure anyone, like listeners, especially. Yeah. Like, you can be successful and do what you need to do, and times are what they are. Like, money, you are the best judge of where your money is going to be spent. So I totally respect that. And especially when you're coming at it like this is a business expense as well. Like, this isn't, so all of that has to be taken into consideration. And then I totally hear you on that. Like, and I appreciate that feedback. And like we said before, like, we have to have these conversations of keep saying, well, what about here? What about addressing this? And making mistakes. I know me personally, that's something we talked about, is like, you're going to screw up in this, you're going to mess up. And that's not to say that, what we're doing is perfect or is going to be the end all. I get super excited over, seemingly small steps, and you're right. And maybe, on the back end, it is really easy to see, okay, up front, this is being done, but it does take time for the effects to come to fruition, for it to be seen. Even more so now that you've joined. That's why conversations like the one we're having are so important, is that it keeps going, that it's not just a one-time, okay, they had a great conference. Okay, well, what's our programming going to be like for the rest of the year? What new initiatives are we starting? What are our grants? There's so many things to that. And so I'm someone that, as long as it's, with good intent, you can always tell when somebody's approaching with good intent. I welcome not challenge. I welcome, like, to be challenged, to be better. And to improve, because that's what I'm here for.
Yeah. So, I mean, to that degree, like, I've been, like, for the past few years, 2 or 3, I think, I've been giving as like a annual membership to both Crafting the Future, which is like solely focused on like the BIPOC community, and getting people from those communities into whatever craft and art that they really have a passion for. So I've been giving to them, and then also giving to Woo. And so like, those were things where it's like, I'm being very not, I don't want to say cautious, but I'm being very intentional with where like I'm putting my money. And it's like, I can understand, like I understood the whole time, like I knew you were on the board. I know other people who are on the board. I'm like, all awesome people, all good hearts, all great intentions. I need to see the fruits of the labor before before I'm gonna put my name there. Like, because I'm trying to stand for something, right? And stand maybe firm in and all of my values. And I want people to see that when they look at me, like to see if somebody did an audit on my finances, where they see my money go, like that's what I want to show up. And so it was like, okay, once and I've had conversations with Monica and Pam and all of them. And I say the same things to them too. It's like, you're doing great. I just need you to do a little bit more. Like, and in that regard, I applaud like you who's kind of gone in and like you're doing the work. That's one of those places where I've also had to draw some lines for myself of like, not only where am I putting my money, where am I putting my energy? And I think most people understand by now that I don't have a ton of time. It's just lying around. So if I'm gonna take any of that lying around time, put it somewhere, it's very, very intentional. And I think, at least personally, recently I've liked focusing locally. So I wanted to, like, I thought about this when you were talking about all of these great resources out there. There's these great resources that you can definitely find like on social media. But believe it or not, there are still even young people who are not on social media. And I'm thinking to myself, like the feedback I get, and I'm even thinking of my own state, the state of Iowa. We have a few maker spaces, not very many though. And as far as like a craft school versus, like a university or what am I thinking? The 2-year schools. Why is that slipping my mind?
Like
Community
technical colleges.
yeah. Besides those, right? Which there are no craft schools. There are no, like I have to travel, if I want to go somewhere like a Penland or something like that. Like it's gonna be a place to travel to. And especially now that I'm a parent, that becomes like even more difficult because you're talking about time away from home, all those things. And so I was thinking about this, like this idea of like maybe not necessarily rural, but still like not in large cities where like all of these resources seem to be much more like abundant and talked about and available. Like, what are your thoughts, especially maybe from the viewpoint of like you're on a board of a place that's probably has this on their radar to some degree? Like, how do we get this accessible in the sense of like those places that aren't as populated, those places that like, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something kind of like near and dear to my heart. Living in rural South Carolina, art has saved me, and I was very lucky to have just enough people, and just enough access to resources that I was like, okay, like I can do theater, I can do this. But as they remove funding for that in schools, they take those outlets, those opportunities away. So it's hugely important that someone is showing kids that, hey, this exists, this is right out there, this is something that you can even just have fun with your brain with, that you need to know about. It's a huge issue, especially living in rural places as we do. But then it's also, you think about in the cities and you think about cost of living, and overheads and maker spaces. And like, I love hearing about, places in Brooklyn and then like Allied Woodshop in LA, like very heavily populated, cities where they've been able to make do, find a space and make it their own and still have that community woodshop aspect.
Right.
In a place that's not typically, viewed as like a welcoming space to,
Mhm.
you think of wood shop, you think in the, like you said,
Yep.
in the woods, in the country. So I think it's incredibly important that we, support initiatives like that, because there are also, just as there are kids in rural, counties and places here, there are kids in the cities that are, don't have access
Mhm.
to these things that could really enrich their life, whether they decide to become an artist or not. It's just
Right.
something beautiful that people need to enjoy. And that alone is worth trying to fight to bring that to folks. I'm really interested in looking for grants. Big issue for me when I was, just starting out was living in rural South Carolina.
Mhm.
The nearest big craft show was in Atlanta, 3 to 4 hours away. And that was driving, and then beyond that, it was okay, Chicago, New York,
Right.
St. Paul, Baltimore. There was really nothing really big on the eastern seaboard, in the southeastern, unless you went to, Florida. And that can be tricky for woodworkers, especially if
Mhm.
you're coming from out of town, just wood movement and things like that. But then you approach shipping costs, and then if
Yep.
you're doing the show, you've got show cost, and it is extremely prohibitive for emerging artists, especially, that may not have
Mhm.
financial backing, or a regular steady flow of income, to make those things happen.
Yep.
And so really interested. I know we have the Furniture Society, has the FASO program, which works to help offset, pay for shipping costs for artists that are traveling kind of cross country and things like that. And I think there needs to be more programs like that help bridge those gaps. We're not going to be able to change the shipping industry, but we
Right.
can create resources for artists to access, that will enable them to pursue their goals and pursue their dreams, and get to an exhibition. I know so many artists, it's kind of typical. You often just send the piece, and you
Yep.
don't even get to attend the event or anything like that, which, like, the virtual world has somewhat helped with that. But there definitely need to be more resources for people to be able to participate in these types of things. Same goes for educational workshops.
Mhm.
It's extremely prohibitive for a lot of people to take a week off from their work, their lives, their families, travel to the mountains, pay for a course, pay for room and board, pay for gas, pay for all the
Mhm.
things that it takes to do for that. And if we are really wanting to make this as inclusive and accessible as possible, I understand that we have to keep our doors open and things like that, but this is where the work has to be done. And
Mhm.
so
Well, I
yeah.
almost wonder, like, I mean, this is something, and I really hope that I get to see this through one day, which is essentially I'm leaning more and more towards probably creating a craft school somewhere here in the Midwest, and then um, also getting to a point of those shows, because those shows only happen on the East Coast and the West Coast, and nowhere. I mean, Chicago. Okay, there is Chicago, but really nowhere else in between. And for one, I'm like, I don't want to have to necessarily uproot my life to one of the coasts just to become successful um, in the careers, let alone like you talked about. I mean, I've looked at the cost for getting into those shows, and I'm like, yeah, that's not happening like anytime soon. I mean, you're talking thousands of dollars. And if you're just getting started, I don't know how you ever have that money. And then it's one of those catch 22s, right? If you can't get to the show, then you can't grow the business to be able to afford to go to the show. Like, it's just this
So what do you do?
cycle. So exactly. And so I think, like, I guess I foresee a future of maybe I think it's good, yes, to continue to like have grants, scholarships available for people to go to those things. But I think we also, like, the I mean, I am from Iowa, so Field of Dreams mentality, which is if you build it, they will come. So I think we need to start building out some of these things in smaller communities, because just because you live in a small community doesn't mean you can't appreciate fine furniture, that you can't appreciate artwork, that you can't appreciate these things. Like, I think And I think if it's done like grassroots community-based style, like everybody benefits from that, right? Because if the focus is on community, I just think, I don't know, that it just grows us all together at the same time. Like there's no gatekeeping happening if you're opening it up to the whole community.
Absolutely. And, what comes to mind immediately is, what Sarah Marriage has been able to do with Woo. That's a great example. She's in Baltimore. That is, a very heavily populated area. And she works her butt off, don't get me wrong. But another great thing, through Women of Woodworking and that project is that there are people, around the world that are creating these maker spaces and creating books and publications that are very community based. And I absolutely agree with you. I think that when you do it for the community, it's almost like it can't fail. Like when the community sees what you're doing and sees the value in it, and once you have that support, it's going to be a good outcome. Regardless, as long as you have that mission and that intent at the forefront always. But I agree with you. I think that it is very small steps that we've taken, but there needs to be maker spaces. I'm trying to think, even in a city like Charleston, as cosmopolitan as it is, we have Redux, a contemporary art center that does a lot of community-based, more contemporary art educational outreach. We have the Charleston Woodworking School, but as far as, a strictly dedicated makerspace, it's something that's always been talked about. Another really interesting thing is, again, pricing, people being able to do these things for the community that aren't necessarily about chasing a profit, but more about creating access, tend to struggle whenever they're trying to exist in a neighborhood that's being, eaten up by developers and want to make a profit off that space. So
I know I get told very frequently, and it always pisses me off. I get told very frequently that, Katie, you have to make a profit if you're going to be a business. And I'm like, why? I have to make a profit. Why can't I just give everything
this
away?
Is a non-profit organization. Yes. Thank you. Oh, that's funny.
I mean, because I don't, it's just one of those things. It's kind of, I think you said it earlier, maybe a little bit of elitist status, going into it. And I hate to say this, but generally what also goes with that is very few population from BIPOC communities, probably not as few from the queer community, because a lot of times they can be in dual income, no kid type of situations, and so they have a little bit more fluid cash flow. Sure. But still, it tends to be heavily white, heavily male. Like that's who's making it, and that really is like the core. And it was funny because I wrote this. I mean, I put this all out black and white, sent it to the university when I applied for my MFA, of like, this sucks. This is not equity.
Good for you.
And this is why I'm coming here, so that I can take this and give it to the people that, not even should. I don't want to be a gatekeeper. I just want to share the information and say, like,
exactly.
If you want to go do this, go do it. Like, this is how. And that's why I say, like, I hope to do things like a show in the Midwest, a thing like, because it's like, even if you share all the information, these things still cost so much money, all of that stuff. And I just don't think that's right. Like, I don't understand why it's capitalism, but still, I don't understand like the why, when, like you said, I think if you stand back and look nationally, especially, there's a big wave coming. I mean, I think there is a reason that this show is now called Crafting a Revolution. Like, I really feel like there's this revolution coming where it's going to drastically change the face of like art and craft in this country, at least. And I love it, but there's still just like this group that seems to kind of want to stand in the way. And I want to stop upholding that group, I guess. Stop trying to
Sure.
play into that system and just build what the heck we want to build. I think.
Right. And that's what, you mentioned about like it being, a grassroots movement. We have more tools than ever before to be able to do things like that. The door is open. The opportunity is here. We've got the skills. We've got the drive. Why not? Why not build our own space? Why not build something new? I mean, that's what we do,
right?
Pun intended.
I know.
But I'm with you, and I feel, of course, it's like it just takes time, which
I know.
I want to like claw my own eyes out as I say that. But you're absolutely right. It's kind of like releasing this grip that has been on, but like I have mentioned earlier, I do feel like I look back when I started woodworking and like how isolated I felt. And it's easy for me because I feel like I've been like in the women of what, all I do is talk about, so, but to look at the opportunities here, and then also to talk to a lot of veterans, that got into this, into woodworking, in the 60s and 70s when it was way more challenging for women to participate than it even is now, and to see them participating and engaging in these projects, it really warms my heart. And to get the feedback, because they know they've been through it, they've heard all the comments, they've had all the denials, they've faced all of the barriers, and they're fired up and passionate, but they want to keep doing the work too. I feel like we're all seeing kind of like across generations here how important this work is, and we're in a really exciting time. I think we're in a very divisive,
exciting and exhausting. I'm just gonna put that on.
Exciting and absolutely terrifying. Like exhausting, terrifying. And I know that's just like my annoying personality, but I do see opportunity here, and what I do see, the ultimate conflict here is we are chiseling away at things that no longer work, and there are certain people it's worked for them. They don't want change, but it's here. It's something like no matter what, that is the constant that is going to happen. So we're in a very precarious time. I mentioned, I'm like, I wonder how people will look back at this time in history and think, oh wow, I bet it was crazy, and be like, no, I have no idea, and we're still sitting here hoping and fighting for there to be a future. Right. And we can't lose sight of that. We can't lose sight of that motivation. And it takes all the work, big, small, whatever people can do. That's another thing we mentioned is, we are having, a lot of us are having to be very intentional with our dollars, with our time. That's important. And if you don't have the money, spend some time, volunteer. Even if it's just, an hour on your computer. I mean, you are helping something bigger than yourself.
Right.
There are a lot of ways that people can get involved and give back, take a class, whatever. And that's another conversation, about students and, people that are new to this is, decreasing those types of barriers and access, and just helping everyone build, when one of us succeeds, all of us can succeed. And there's plenty here. There's plenty here for us to be able to enjoy and support each other. And
I think that's like the perfect place for us to say that we've come to the end.
All right.
Our little conversation of the host of Crafting a Revolution. So
yeah, I love it.
Thanks for chatting today, Katie. Always fun.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right, so again, that was a conversation between Katie Thompson and myself, and I'll include links to both of us in the show notes for today, which you can find in your description for the podcast episode, both on your podcast app and on YouTube, or you can head on over to freemanfurnishings.com/podcast to find show notes over there. Be sure to follow along with the podcast over on Instagram at Crafting a Revolution, no spaces, underscores, or periods, all one word, Crafting a Revolution. While there, you can hook up with your host, myself, Katie Freeman, at Freeman Furnishings, and co-host Katie Thompson at Women of Woodworking. A big shout out and thanks to Ashley Minnie, who wrote and performed the theme song for Crafting a Revolution. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please head on over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. If you didn't, don't worry about it. Next week, we will be back with one brand new episode. In the meantime, and as always, let's go craft a revolution.
Solution for the toxic masculinity. Pollution is the constant evolution.